Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of That's Ruddy Mysterious, a podcast of short tales about true mysteries. What created the Potomsky Crater? Who was involved in the 1963 Great Train Robbery? I'm not going to solve those mysteries, but they'll be interesting to learn about. I'm your host, Kelly with an I. Transcripts and references for all episodes can be found at that'sruddymysterious.wordpress.com. No apostrophe and no exclamation point. Today's tale is about Trans World Airlines Flight 841. On April 4th, 1979, TWA Flight 841 began as any standard flight, albeit 45 minutes after schedule. It's not to be confused with the 1974 TWA Flight 841, which had a bomb aboard and went down in the Ionian Sea. The 1979 flight took off from New York's John F. Kennedy Airport, also known as JFK, heading towards Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport in Minnesota, also known as MSP. It was just over an hour into the flight, well over Saginaw, Michigan, when catastrophe struck. TWA Flight 841 was a Boeing 717-31, registration number N840TW. The flight crew on the April 4th, 1979 flight was Captain Harvey Hoot Gibson, First Officer Jess Scott Kennedy, and Flight Engineer Gary Nelson Banks. There was a cloud layer at 20,000 feet. The weather was overcast with small breaks. The visibility was 3 miles and there was a light snow. The incident started at around 9:47 p.m. near 43 degrees 39 minutes north latitude, 84 degrees 5 minutes west longitude. TWA Flight 841 was cruising at 39,000 feet or 11,887 meters and had traveled approximately 540 miles, or about 869 kilometers so far. They reported no turbulence. The plane was cruising on autopilot on altitude hold mode when Captain Gibson first noticed what felt like a slight buzzing underfoot. Within 2 to 3 seconds, the buzzing on the floor became a light shudder. Captain Gibson looked at the instruments and noticed that autopilot was trying to turn left, but all the instruments showed the plane was turning right. The plane began a steep roll to the right at about 35 degrees of right bank and started to nosedive a little bit. The crew immediately turned off autopilot and tried to correct for the plane's actions. They applied both left rudder control and aileron control. Neither worked to correct the plane. Then they deployed the speed brakes. Again, nothing. After several seconds of this ordeal, the plane returned to level. Then once again the plane rolled to the right. The captain believed the plane was going to roll over, so he let up on the throttle to prevent such a thing. The plane then continued to roll, doing a complete 360-degree roll. The captain shouted, "Get them up," asking the first officer to extend the speed brakes, but Kennedy didn't understand. Gibson then deployed the speed brakes himself. The plane then began spiraling downward and completed one more rollover, breaking the sound barrier. The plane was falling fast. In an effort to slow the plane, the captain put the landing gear down. There was a loud explosion, and the plane was suddenly under the cruise control again. It was about 9:58 p.m., and the plane was flying at around 5,000 feet, or about 1,524 meters altitude. In 63 seconds, the plane had rolled over twice, broken the sound barrier, and fallen 34,000 feet, or about 9,449 meters. Finally under control, TWA Flight 841 diverted to Detroit Metropolitan Airport, also known as DTW, in Wayne County, Michigan. They made an emergency landing on runway 3. The crew were unsure that they would be able to land the aircraft because of the loud explosion when extending the landing gear, but they did a fantastic job and landed safely. Of the 82 passengers and 7 crew, only 8 reported minor injuries related to the forces exerted during the event. At some point, the cockpit voice recorder, or CVR, lost the last 21 minutes of the flight. It only recorded for 30 minutes at a time and would record over the previous 30 minutes at regular intervals. The CVR could only be erased by the pilot once the aircraft had reached the gate and had the parking brake engaged. The National Transportation Safety Board, or NTSB, swiftly investigated. They found that the number 7 leading edge slat from the right wing was missing from the plane. The NTSB believed that it may have been extended during flight, while flaps and slats were only intended to be used during low-speed takeoff and landing. The NTSB believed that this may have been the cause of the event. According to the NTSB report, which differs from the crew's version of the story, the aircraft was cruising at 39,000 feet when the number 7 slat was extended. Because the other leading edge devices remained retracted, the plane rolled to the right. The NTSB said that under certain circumstances, the extension of the number 7 slat would exceed counteractions taken by the pilots, making the plane uncontrollable. However, the NTSB believed that some other slats may also have been extended. They determined that the pilots got the plane under control at 8,000 feet, or about 2,438 meters altitude, despite the pilots saying they got it under control at 5,000 feet. The NTSB went to Boeing to have them inspect the other leading edge slats. Boeing concluded that the number 7 slat had failed because it was extended during cruising. According to Boeing, the slat could only have been extended if someone in the crew had manually manipulated the controls. They found that their aircraft didn't malfunction, although it's hard to believe that they would blame themselves when they could put all the blame on the crew. Investigators think that the Boeing 727 pilots often set the trailing edge flaps at 2 degrees while cruising to increase lift without drag, which allows for higher elevation, faster flights, and less fuel consumption. However, all 3 cockpit crew members deny extending the number 7 flap. Gibson said, "At no time before the incident did I take any action within the cockpit, either intentionally or inadvertently, that would cause the extension of the leading edge slats or trailing edge flaps. Nor did I observe any other crew member take any action within the cockpit, either intentionally or inadvertently, which would have caused the extension." The NTSB determined the cause of the incident was isolation of number 7 slat in fully or partially extended position after extension of other leading edge slats and subsequent retraction of additional slats. After eliminating other possibilities, the NTSB concluded that the flight crew extended the slat during the flight to make better time. They said that the plane righted itself after extension of the landing gear because the hydraulics that held the number 7 slat out broke and allowed the slat to retract. That was the explosive sound heard by the crew during the incident. The NTSB completely discounted the crew's testimonies. The cockpit voice recorder was missing 21 minutes, and the NTSB assumed the flight crew erased the CVR recording. It was normal at the time for the flight crew of any given flight to erase the CVR once a flight was over, but the captain in this case said he didn't remember doing it this time. Because of the amount of time between the incident and landing, the CVR wouldn't have been very useful anyway. It would have recorded over the incident, but the NTSB maintained that the crew deleted the recording in order to hide something. The NTSB put all the blame on the crew. However, 18 months later, the Airline Pilots Association, or ALPA, the pilots' union, demanded the NTSB reopen the investigation. ALPA said that the extension of the number 7 slat was a result of the event, not the cause of it. They also said that with the damage to the landing gear, the plane wouldn't have registered that they were on the ground and in park, so the pilot could not have erased the CVR. They also cried foul that the NTSB had the plane's manufacturer run tests to figure out what happened to the aircraft. Boeing said that it was impossible for an actuator to extend independently and that they'd never seen it happen, but if they could blame the crew, why would they find fault in their own product? Boeing insisted that the pilots often slightly extended the flaps to go faster, which was against procedure. The pilots maintained that they would not endanger the lives of all the passengers and crew just to save a little time and fuel. This was a theory only on the part of Boeing, and the TWA wanted it removed from the report, so in 1979, Boeing removed it from the report. According to the pilot, this conclusion was not based on any evidence. The pilots testified under oath and never said that they engaged in this practice. ALPA said that because the NTSB immediately blamed the crew, they didn't do a proper investigation to determine other possible causes. 1 month after the incident, the Boeing 727-31 was repaired and returned to service. After the incident, the TWA changed the ground check procedures. They began checking for actuators. A piece of an actuator had been sent to Boeing for testing and simply disappeared. It's possible it was used for the tests that Boeing ran. The crew believed that they were used as scapegoats for what happened, and in the 1990s, the crew filed a lawsuit to clear their names. In 1983, CBS ran a special about the incident. In it, passengers from the flight said that even if the pilot had been responsible for the incident, he did save their lives. What happened to TWA Flight 841? Were the crew responsible for the incident, or did something in the plane malfunction? What happened to the cockpit voice recorder? What do you think?
Thanks for listening to today's episode of That's Ruddy Mysterious. I'm your host, Kelly with an I. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a review and follow That's Ruddy Mysterious to be updated about new episodes. Tune in next Tuesday for another thought-provoking tale.